Chapter 20. Driving faster than normal, Annika called Cameron. "Hey, Annika," he answered. "Hey, are you busy?" "Never too busy for you. What's up?" "I just have a hunch about the murder case. And if I'm right, I think I'll know who the killer is." "Are you serious?" "Yes. Do you think you could borrow Stu's metal detector and meet me at Patrick's home in half an hour?" Sure. Yeah, I can do that. I'll see you there." "Great, thanks." Within 25 minutes, Annika arrived at the crime scene and headed inside to wait for Cameron. She checked the time on her phone. Cameron should be there in about 5 minutes if he had left right away. If he remembered. Annika shook her head at herself. Stop it, he will remember. Walking through the kitchen, Annika checked every drawer. Which one had she put the pen in? She rummaged around. Duct tape, scissors, utensils, napkins, several pens. Aha! There it was. Too bad Annika had used it. Whatever fingerprints may have been on it had been smudged by hers. "Give me that pen." She froze. Then slowly, rigidly, robotically turned, then choked on her breath when she saw the barrel of a gun, millimeters from her face. "Give me the pen," Brian repeated. Every muscle in her body tight, Annika handed it over, trying to not look at the weapon. Brian stuffed the pen in his pocket. "Brian, you don't... Be quiet. Turn around. Keep your hands up." She obeyed, feeling completely vulnerable as Brian removed her gun from its holster. What, one gun wasn't enough? A drawer slid open, like he was hiding her weapon in one of them. "Brian, this isn't going to solve anything. You're just going to make things worse for yourself." She stood there, focusing on her breathing, praying harder than she ever had. Someone knocked on the door. Oh no. Cameron did come. He did remember. Brian jerked, and then slung an arm around Annika's neck and yanked her to the game room. Annika gasped, pain, pressure on her neck as he dragged her down the hall. The front door opened. Thankfulness and dread lined her insides. She wanted Cameron to protect her, to save her, but she couldn't let him be hurt. What could they do? Brian had a gun, and now she had nothing. Cameron would have what? The metal detector? "Annika?" Cameron called. "You here?" She sucked in a sharp breath as Brian pressed the barrel of the gun to her temple. "Cameron, don't! Don't come in!" she shouted. But Cameron was already in the doorway, hands up, eyes wide. "Don't come any closer!" Brian warned. "Whoa, hey." "Calm down," Cameron said. "Brian, let her go." Brian glanced at the metal detector, and then he turned toward the window. "You gonna look for the bullet with that?" Cameron looked down at the metal instrument. His face reddened. Pointing the gun at Cameron now, Brian backed up, pulling Annika with him. "Go. Get the bullet out of the yard." Cameron watched him, unmoving. "Do it!" Brian smashed the gun against Annika's cheek. All right! Just don't hurt her." Cameron walked to the back door. Annika winced. "Please, God, protect us. Protect Cameron." All three of them moved outside. Brian kept a firm grip on her, keeping a good distance from Cameron, but keeping a close eye on his progress. Annika kept her hands on his arm, trying to give her some breathing room. Cameron stiffly scanned the area with the metal detector, glancing in Annika's direction every so often. And then the detector started beeping incessantly. "There! That's it," Brian said, sounding breathless. Slipping off the bulky device, Cameron knelt, dug in the dirt, and soon pulled up a copper bullet. Annika had been right. But now that evidence was going into the killer's hands. Brian wouldn't let them go after what they witnessed. But surely he wouldn't kill them in cold blood. Would he? He had killed Patrick. Were their lives any different? "Drop the bullet and back up," Brian told him. Cameron did. Brian moved forward with Annika and released his hold around her neck, kept a hand on her shoulder, told her to pick up the bullet and give it to him. Fingers now clenching her shoulder, digging down deeper and deeper, he cocked the gun. Feeling the barrel on the back of her head, Annika picked up the bullet and held it up for him. Cameron watched her, their desperation, fear, and uncertainty palpable, flowing to and from each other. Once he had put the bullet in his pocket, Brian wrapped his arm around her neck again. Hey, you have what you want, Cameron said calmly. Now let her go. I can't do that, he answered. Don't follow me. Tightening his grip, Brian pulled her along through the gate that led to the front of the house. Where would he take her? What was his plan? Her eyes darted to the houses lined up the street. Plenty of cars, but no people in sight. She heard no one. No questions arising, no screams of alarm. Would he stuff her in his car and drive it off a cliff? And what about Cameron? If he tried to get her in the car, she'd put up a fight. She'd scream, flail, bite, and spit. She would go down trying, not numbly sit in his car while he drove her to the woods and shot her and disposed of her body. Please, God, help me. I don't want to die. If it be your will, help me get out of this. Right before they reached his car, the sweet sound of sirens wailed throughout the neighborhood. Brian froze in the driveway. In patrol cars, Detective Harrison and other officers peeled out to a stop in the cul-de-sac. Droplets of relief began to replace the dread, but Annika wasn't out of this yet. Lower your weapon! Detective Harrison ordered, drawing his gun on Brian. Commands rang up all around them, shouting at Brian to let her go, to drop the gun, to show them his hands. Annika's heart pounded, knowing this could go either way. Brian could release her and go to prison, or shoot her and be shot himself. Brian's ragged breathing grated against her ear. Please, God. All at once, the pressure left her throat. The gun moved away from her head. Brian raised his hands and dropped the gun. Officers swarmed in. In a daze, Annika stumbled to them in a run, and two of them guided her to safety. In a moment, they had Brian on the ground in cuffs. Then he was marched to a police car. Detective Harrison approached Annika and gave her a quick, fatherly hug. You okay? She nodded, out of breath, out of sorts. Thank you. How did you know to come? Cameron called us about 30 minutes ago. Told us you had a hunch about the case, but that we should come. I guess he had a feeling or a premonition. And then he called us again just now, telling us you were being held hostage. Everything blurred. Thank you. Cameron dashed toward her. Annika! Cameron! Rushing to him, she collapsed against his chest, gasping out the tears of shock, fear, relief, and thankfulness. Cradling her face in his hands, Cameron brushed away the tears, and then touched his lips to hers in a comforting and reassuring kiss. She was his. She was safe. She was home. At the police station, Cameron and Annika gave their statements to Detective Harrison. Now they and Brian were seated in the interrogation room. The detective took the gun Brian had and removed the clip. It was empty. No bullets were in the gun, not even one in the chamber. I didn't want to hurt anybody, Brian mumbled, handcuffed to the chair at the table. I just wanted to find my pen and the gun and get out of there. Then why did you take Annika outside? Harrison asked. What was your plan? I don't know! I panicked. I hadn't thought of what to do yet. He glanced her way. How did you know? Annika shifted in her seat beside Cameron. Celia found a gold pen on the counter in Patrick's home. When I realized Patrick had a gold pen on him when he died, I followed a hunch that someone from Fuller Advertising left their pen behind after killing him. I also thought it was suspicious that there was no sign of the shooter that day we found you at Patrick's. We never heard any more from him. You didn't ask for police protection. Okay. Brian put up a hand. I get it. Detective Harrison hit record on the tape, and Brian began. I had tried calling Patrick, but of course he was ignoring me. But he knew the routine by now. A lab rat could understand the routine by now. On the 15th of every month, I'd stop by or we'd meet somewhere, and he would pay me $3,000. But once again, Patrick was late. Patrick was avoiding me. Approaching his door, I knocked and then planted myself on the mat. I wasn't budging until I left with something green in my hand, even if it was an underpayment. I needed it. Well, I guess I just wanted it. But Patrick didn't need the money either. He was greedy. That was probably the only thing we had in common. When I waited for about a full minute, I pounded on the door and rang the doorbell. Hey, Patty! Open up! I know you're in there! I bounced on the welcome mat, stuffing my hands in my pockets. His car was parked out front. He had to be inside. Okay, if you're not going to come out, I guess I'll have to tell someone what I know. All right then, I'm leaving. This is the last you'll hear from me. This is your last day of freedom, Gould! He yanked the door open. Shut up! Shut up! Someone's going to hear. Oh, wow. His hair was all crazy. He had a bandage by his eye. He looked like he'd been in a fight and lost. And he looked super annoyed. More annoyed than usual when he looked at me. I already told you I'm low on cash, he said. Oh, come on. I pushed past him, walking into his living room. I'm sure you can find a few hundreds around here somewhere. Or you could write me a check. I pulled out my gold pen and set it on the counter. I loved seeing him squirm. Here, sign away. Exhaling, Patrick marched over to his safe. I poured myself a drink. I'd loved these moments when I was in control. Actually, I was always in control. He knew if he ever got too mad or too aggressive, if he ever tried anything, I would be the one who got the last laugh. If I ever felt threatened, I'd tell Fuller or the police, maybe both, that Patrick had been stealing for over a year. I had a hold over him, and he hated it. When Patrick stared into his safe, I wandered over, sipping my drink. He was stalling. So I started talking, taunting, teasing, anything to get on his nerves. Anything to get him to shove some money at me so I could be on my way and let my biggest dilemma be where I was going to spend it all. I kept going. Once I got started, it was hard to stop, enjoying how my words made his face red, made him cover his ears and grit his teeth. But I guess I pushed him too far, because the next thing I knew, he punched me. I groaned and stumbled backward. Once I steadied myself, I glared at him. Dude, what is wrong with you? Fuming, Patrick reached into his safe, but he didn't pull out money. Something black. A gun. I went stiff. Whoa, Pat, shut up. I shut up. I have had it with your chatter. I have had it with your stupid stories. I have had it with you bleeding me dry. Patrick, come on, you can't kill me. They're gonna know you did it. Please, by the time they find your body, I'll be long gone, living a new, carefree, chatter-free life. He pulled the hammer back. He was going to kill me, no matter what I said or did. Shaking, I threw my drink in his face, aiming the liquid for his eyes, and then chucked the glass at his head. Then I took off down the hall. Oh, you are dead! He screamed. The gun fired. He'd missed because I didn't feel any pain. Then again, maybe I was in shock and just hadn't felt it. Footsteps bounded after me. Yeah, you better run, you coward! I found myself in his game room. Hiding behind the door, I checked myself to make sure I wasn't injured. I was fine. All that hurt was my nose. That and my chest, but only because I was breathing so hard. Snatching a pool cue, I tried to quiet my breathing, to not be so loud. He padded into the room, gun low, both hands around it. Come out and face me like a man. Hard hammering, I slowly moved forward, and then swung the cue as hard as I could, hitting him in the back of the head. Patrick groaned and went to his hands and knees. The gun had fallen too. It lay in the corner of the room. He was reaching for it. If I didn't grab it now, he'd kill me for sure. Whacking him with the cue again, I dove for the gun. We started fighting for it, grunting and struggling for control. The gun went off, directly into the wall across from the window. I push-kicked him, and kicked him again, until I was able to rip the gun away. Then I fired twice. He made a horrible sound, like a dying dog, which is what he was. Patrick was dead. Blood soaked his shirt and began to dribble on the carpet. I was shaking like crazy. Couldn't believe what I'd done. I had killed someone. But it was over, and now all I needed to do was protect myself. But before I left, I went back to the living room and took all the money from the safe. Stuffed the green paper into a duffel bag I found in the hall closet. The safe was wide open, just begging for someone to take the contents. I was wearing gloves, thankfully. No need to worry about my fingerprints anywhere. Then I left, taking his gun with me. I didn't understand what Patrick meant when he said he would be long gone by the time anyone found my body. Detective Harrison answered. Patrick was planning to fly out of the country the following morning with the money. Brian scoffed lightly. Anyway, when I went back to the house the first time, I was trying to find my pen. I panicked when I heard voices in the living room. So I grabbed a blanket to muffle the sound and shot my arm. The bullet went through my arm and out the window. I was hoping to make everyone believe there was no way I could be involved, that someone from the outside had targeted me. Before they came in the room, Brian glanced at Cameron and Annika. I hid the gun, my gloves that were covered in powder burns, and the blanket in a closet drawer. That's why you refused to go to the hospital. You were afraid they would find traces of powder burns. Brian nodded. And then I planned the stolen money in Celia's apartment. I was hoping I was in the clear, but when I saw Annika at the office and Kelly told us she gave her that list, I panicked. So I went back to the house to look for the pen and grabbed the gun where I had hidden it. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do. I just knew I couldn't let her turn me in. I hated Patrick's guts, but it was self-defense. Hitting the stop button, Detective Harrison asked, "What about your alibi with Laura? Most people had paid for their movie tickets with cash, so we had no real way of knowing if you two went out or not." Brian shook his head. "We didn't go to the movies. When you and Annika came to question everyone, I pulled Laura aside and told her that we should cover for each other. Neither of us had an alibi, and both of us had our reasons to kill Patrick. It didn't take long for her to agree." With a glance at one of the officers, Detective Harrison motioned for him to take Brian. Grasping Brian's arm, the man led him away, and once the door closed, Annika exhaled deeply. "Wow." Cameron nodded. That confession sounded like something from television. "Well, thank you very much, Detective." "Thank you, both of you. The case is closed." Detective Harrison tossed the file on the desk with a satisfied grin. Annika straightened. "Hey, this means—" "Yes," the detective answered. "Celia is being released as we speak." Sighing in utter relief, Annika hugged Cameron. Celia had been cleared. The murderer had been caught. The case was solved. "Thank you, Lord."